Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay like this, Dave? Sounds like it, I think. We are on page 152, I do believe. Is that right? Yes. I'm not sure. I have two bookmarks. That's a mistake. No, I think we're on page 49. Long time ago?
You mean 149?
Could it be? I have a bookmark at page 152 and at page 49. 152, are we that far?
Yeah, we've done the full day.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Oh, we're around 143.
You're on 143? Let me go there. Gretchen was reading my book. and she grabbed the bookmark. This is my short hand way of knowing where we left off. I think you're right, 143, beginning at mind. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, 143. So again, he's going through profound Buddhism after just touching on the Hinayana and processing motions through the conventional Mahayana. Then he's jumped to the Vajrayana, and of course that's most of the book. So we are on 143, which is mind. We just finished the chapter on mechanisms of samsara. All right, 143 it is. There's an introductory paragraph. It says the use of the term mind brings the possibility of confusion if one is not careful. In Tibetan, as in French or English, many terms are used to convey the nuances necessary in speaking about the mind, such as mind, consciousness, psyche, intellect. Nevertheless, the term sem, rendered as mind in Tibetan, has generic value, covering a field of meaning appreciably larger than French or English, since it is used to convey the notions of soul used in theological terminology and of being used in metaphysics. It is necessary to see that the word mind sometimes refers to the psychological domain and sometimes to ontology. So ontology is the study of the nature of existence. From the Buddhist point of view, one would probably say that one remains in the domain of psychology when one envisions an atrophied function, the ego, and that one passes into ontology when one sees the mind in its original purity as an unlimited, eternal mind, free of any conditioning. In the teaching transcribed here, the reader who wants to avoid confusion must not lose the view of this double meaning. In one word, it is at times a question of the superficial apprehension of the mind that we take as normal, and sometimes it is the true nature of the mind that is to be discovered. Although mind is there for all eternity, it underlies the multiple fluctuations of the ego with which we falsely identify. The nature of mind certainly is the main teaching of Kalu Rinpoche, a subject to which he continually returned. This is why, although the nature of the mind is extremely covered in this chapter, extensively covered in this chapter, we also frequently find some reminders or complements in other chapters. Yeah, this is a wonderful thing to have said, because there's so much, we're so limited by our language, and there's so much meaning that comes with a word. And here we are, we don't have a non-dual tradition in the West. And so this is an excellent point, that this word mind, we usually think of mind as the thinking, the feeling mind, the psychological mind. But it also includes the nature of the mind, which is something that is ordinarily veiled. with word compassion, has similar kind of misunderstandings, because there's a compassion that is like, the ordinary worldly compassion, the psychological compassion, and even there's quite a range of meaning. For instance, the word compassion itself meaning with, in Latin root, with passion, with feeling. And so that's certainly compassion in a worldly sense. We see Jigten Sumgön has a teaching somewhere. We'll have to find that because it's a very wonderful one about how you raise this feeling of compassion. And it's the kind of feeling you have when you see like a sheep being hauled to the slaughterhouse, or to the slaughter. So there's worldly compassion, yes, and that's important that we recognize that we practice that. But then there's compassion in the sense of compassion with a capital C, which is, so if compassion in the worldly sense is, with feeling, so you're like sharing the feelings of the object of your attention or another being. In the absolute sense, compassion with a capital C is your understanding, just your pure abstract. So with understanding, you should think of it like that. So it's not related to the afflictions at all. You've seen through them, you're seeing into them, you're seeing the nature of them. So it's, again, infinitely more powerful and deep than our ordinary use of the word compassion. And so similarly with mind. Okay, so now on to Kalu Rinpoche. We have a superficial notion of what the mind is. For us, it is what has the feeling of existing and thinks it is me, or I exist. The mind is also that which is aware of the thoughts and experiences the emotions, and, according to circumstances, feels happy or miserable. Other than that, we do not truly know our mind. It is even probable that we have never asked ourselves this question: what is the mind? Next section is the mind perceives, not the organs. First, it is obvious that the mind has no material existence. It is not an object defined by color, size, volume, or form. None of these characteristics is applicable. One cannot point to the mind and say it is that. In this sense, the mind is empty. Although the mind is lacking form, color, and so on, it is not enough to conclude that it has no existence. Thoughts, feelings, and conflicting emotions that the mind feels and produces prove that something functions and exists, that the mind is not just empty. What is this feeling of existing? Where is it located? Outside or inside the body? If it is located inside the body, what feels it? The flesh, blood, bone, nerves, veins, lungs, the heart? If you carefully reflect on this, you have to admit that no limb or organ claims its own existence by saying I. Therefore, the mind cannot be identified with a part of the body. Let us take the example of the eye. The eye does not proclaim its own existence. It does not make the claim I exist or I must look at an external form. This form is beautiful, the other one is not. I am attached to the first one and I reject the second one. Okay, the I itself has no volition, senses no feeling, neither attachment nor aversion. It is the mind that has the feeling of existing, that perceives, judges, is attached, or that rejects. It is the same for the ear and sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and tastes, the skin and contacts, the mental body and phenomenon. The sense organs do not perceive, the mind does. And you can see this simply, when we say this is my I. So it's not the I, there's something else there. Next, a car needs a driver. Organs, unconscious by nature, are not the mind, but they are rather like a house in which people live. The inhabitants are called consciousnesses. So there's a visual consciousness, an auditory consciousness, olfactory consciousness, gustatory consciousness, tactile consciousness, mental consciousness. These consciousnesses do not exist by themselves, autonomously. They are no other than mind. The body is similar to an automobile and the mind to a driver. When the car is not in use, it can have all the equipment necessary for driving, an engine, wheels, gasoline, and so on, in perfect shape, yet it can go nowhere by itself. Similarly, a body lacking mind, even if it possesses all the organs, is only a corpse. It may have eyes, ears, and a nose, yet it cannot see or hear or feel. Some people think that death is not only of the body, but also that of the mind. The body becomes a corpse, the mind simply ceases to exist. But this is not so. The mind is not born, does not die, and is not affected by illness. It is eternal. What perceives the forms as registered by the eye, sounds heard by the ear, and all other objects through the other sense organs, that which is aware and not interrupted by death of the body, is therefore the mind. We have yet to define the true nature of this mind. Given that the mind lacks material characteristics, as we saw previously, it is not possible to designate mind as a visible object or a thing easily recognizable, because if it were, someone would show it to us. Everyone having a mind must refer to oneself, and with the guidance of a master, proceed with an investigation leading to the discovery of what the mind truly is. Does it have form, color, volume? Is it located outside or inside the body? These are necessary questions to which one must find an answer by personal experience, even if one has already received theoretical explanations, such as those that have been given. So yeah, this is all very important. We can, have teachings and read and understand this kind of conceptual idea of what the mind is, how it exists. There is, the whole gradual path of practice, which is this two-fisted operation going on of wisdom and compassion. So on the compassion side, like all the things that we do, all the practices, merit building activities, the offerings, the 6 paramitas. On the wisdom side, there is this analysis. So we start out with the meditation of calming the mind, shamatha. And then when we have, I make it sound like a ladder, but it's not really, because these processes are really going on simultaneously for us. And so it's not quite like it seems in the book. The books, the teachings are for us having confidence, understanding the process, understanding what to do, learning and practicing. But it doesn't necessarily unfold in some sort of textbook kind of way. And that's a very wonderful thing. So the general process, though, is that first the calming of the mind through the practices of shamatha, any kind of concentration, the practice of mindfulness and awareness, whatever the object of meditation is. But this idea that by holding the mind to an awareness of a particular object, whether it's our breath, whether it's a concept, whether it's a visualized seed syllable, whether it's a mandala, counting the numbers 1 to 20, whatever it might be, that focused aspect, that concentration aspect naturally calms the mind. Because what you're doing is, instead of our normal worldly mindset of just thoughts kind of randomly arising or being generated by us, and then us jumping around to all those thoughts, keeping our whole attention there, instead, we're doing this arbitrary thing of having an object of meditation and focusing on it. And just patiently, again and again and again, every time with our awareness, we discover that we have wandered, we just bring it back to the object. So eventually, with this kind of a little bit of discipline with the mind, it's said to be like, normally there are sun rays all over the place. But this practice of mindfulness and shamatha is like holding up a lens to the sun. Instead of all those light rays going in all these different directions, it can focus it, and you can actually you can start a fire with that focus. So that lens process is what you're doing in the shamatha. Well, when the mind, one of the sensations you might say, or the experiences of a calm mind, is that there's like more space, because you're not being hounded left, right, and every which way by random thoughts that you attach to and that you think you have to act on, or that are very disturbing or whatever. So with that sense of spaciousness, it's like there's more room. The mind becomes more pliable, you might say, and there's room to work. And what is the work? Well, in the gradual path, it's the teachings of Vipassana. So we start intellectually analyzing and then contemplating on that, questioning deeply until we have a certain kind of stability of the understanding. But it's purely conceptual at this point. But there's actually a process going on that is not conceptual. So we're using concepts truly to get beyond concepts. This is the great magic of the Vajrayana, but we're not even there yet. This is the same process happening, but in a system that we're immediately at home with, because you don't have to become someone else. We're using our ordinary thinking dualistic mind. And now, because it's a little bit more pliable or more powerful, you might say, because of the control, control is just awareness, which is just concentration, then we can think about what is the nature of the mind. And so there's this investigation, intellectual, that goes on, but it's more than purely intellectual, because you're using this sort of empowered mind. Now, that can take you right to the edge with this deep kind of understanding. It's like you're preparing the mind for a breakthrough, when suddenly, some aspect of realization can dawn on you. So the greatness of this is that you don't have to go anywhere else. You don't have to be anything other than what you are. You don't have to have special spiritual qualities or any of the kinds of things that we throw around about. It's just this ordinary process of using our thinking mind, but using it in a valid way. Instead of thoughting, you might say we're thinking for the first time, with concentration and with, complete involvement. So, all right, next, listening, reflecting, and meditating. So these are the three excellences. The practice of the Dharma is always composed of three stages: listening, reflecting, and meditating. Sometimes this is translated as hearing, analyzing, and meditating. But listening, reflecting, and meditating. Listening is receiving theoretical teachings and instructions. It is essential to be able to faithfully recall what has been told or read. Reflecting consists of making a discursive examination of the data that one has received, or proceeding to an investigation to seek answers to certain questions. In the present case, for example, one searches for the form and color of the mind, its location, its level of existence, and so on. Meditating takes place once certain conclusions have been drawn by reflecting. Meditating must be non-discursive and without discontinuity. So in other words, you hear the teachings, and then you start to ponder them with this reflection and analysis. Asking the question, is this true this way, this true this way? You're reading, you're studying, you're seeing how all these things relate, and you're getting more solid stability in the mind. Because there's one thing, the greatness of just hearing the teachings. I mean, it truly is amazing in this world where everything is a betrayal and everything falls short. To suddenly come across learning the teachings, that there actually is a path, that there is a way out of this fundamental dissatisfaction. I mean, that's already your mind has some stability. Instead of this normal panic where it's normal just ignoring everything because it's too painful to contemplate and just running around in samsara, chasing thoughts and being chased by thoughts. Instead, there's already some stability. There's the hope. Hope's not really a Buddhist word, but there's this suddenly dawning in the mind that, oh my goodness, you learn about the Buddha, there's something there. So that fundamental kind of faith. Then in the reflecting rather, that's where you're really, like the Buddha said, taking, a piece of gold and pounding it to remove the impurities. So you're really crystallizing your intellectual understanding. And you can take that understanding right up to the point of meditation, where you have this confidence in what you've learned. And then you can just sort of abide in it, so to speak. You're not wrestling with it anymore, but you have this thorough kind of intellectual understanding. And because truthfully it's valid, it allows itself to be meditated upon in a beneficial way. So just staying with that understanding, the wisdom, the understanding that comes from that deep analysis. And this can go on for a long time. And actually there are different levels of understanding too. So in some sense, it's a process that never stops until very deep enlightenment. But nonetheless, meditation. Remember, meditation in Tibetan is gom, G-O-M. It means to grow accustomed to. But you have to have something there to grow accustomed to. This is so helpful. This threefold teaching on hearing, or listening rather, reflecting, and meditating. There's so much meditation going on around the country these days, but people don't even have the idea of growing accustomed to. They haven't gotten to the point of having something to grow accustomed to. There can still be some benefits, of course, but this gradual path is extremely helpful. You avoid all sorts of pitfalls. Okay. These three stages constitute an obligatory sequence. Obligatory. What is given here belongs to the listening phase. It is necessary to memorize it before approaching the next stage. To describe the mind, one considers three aspects. In essence, emptiness. Its nature is clarity. Its mode of functioning is intelligence. So emptiness, clarity, and intelligence. Sometimes the intelligence is translated as knowingness. It has the quality of knowing, of understanding. So emptiness, clarity, and intelligence. First, emptiness. The essence of the mind is to be empty. This means, as already pointed out, that the mind has no material existence. It has no form, no color, no volume, no size. It is untouchable, invisible, like space. And clarity. The mind, however, is not like an obscure space, which the sun, the moon, or the stars cannot illuminate, but rather it is like space during the day, or the space of a lighted room. This is a comparison and only an approximation. It means that the mind possesses a certain power of knowing. This is not knowledge itself, but illumination, or the ability of consciousness that renders knowledge possible. So this is very fine kind of slicing of the empty mind. This ability includes the ability to produce manifestation. When you think of America or India, your mind has the ability of making their inner image appear. This capacity of knowing and the ability of evoking are the clarity of the mind. Because of light, you can see objects in the room where you are and be aware of their presence. Because of clarity, the mind also has the ability of knowing. Go back on this a little bit. This ability includes the ability to produce manifestation. And now you see, with this kind of understanding, it gives you an understanding of the Tantra. That the Tantra is not just some sort of make-believe kind of thing, but you're exercising the clarity aspect of the mind in manifesting a Buddha, manifesting yourself as a Buddha. This is the source of the great creativity of it all. I mean, because you're going right to the creative aspect of of our mind. And by doing these visualizations, you are abiding in that creative process. You are abiding in the clarity of the mind. So instead, as we normally are running around, the worldly beings and all of us, in kind of an occluded state, instead, paradoxically, by visualizing yourself or maintaining the seed syllable, however you're doing it, part of the visualization, whatever, but that actual visualization process, the effort itself, is abiding in the clarity of the mind. And really, since we have this nature, it's just a matter of abiding in it. Now, normally it's so covered over that all these Dharma teachings are this great inheritance that we have. Because even in a very diluted state, you can still relate to certain forms. And so it uses forms, in a sense, to get beyond forms or to see the nature of all forms. It is just extremely skillful. But you can see how there's no contradiction in these teachings of this gradual path. You're getting these glimmers of what's going on.
Would you characterize that as primordial awareness?
Yes, it's your primordial awareness, but again, the perfection of wisdom. So it's just a little kind of slice of it, you might say, or it might not even be realized, but the fact that we're doing it actually means that there is realization there.
On the road to primordial awareness.
On the road to fullness of it, yeah. So that's why in the perfection, they're talking about the perfection of prajna paramita, the perfection of prajna. And pra means, transcendent, like, pra means like transcendent, and jhana means knowing. So the obscurations of knowing, there are two great obscurations that veil us. One are the kleshas, the emotional blockages, veils, but the other one is jnana, the mind blockages. So this is why, the perfection of prajna paramita, the perfection. It's really amazing how it all sort of ties together. But it's so important because then when you're doing also the visualizations, you have more confidence in them because you've done this process of thinking through it, so to speak. And you've already understood this business of, the nature of the mind. You can manifest stuff. And right now we're manifesting all of these appearances, and it puts them on a different level, so to speak.
Forms to go beyond forms.
Yeah.
Is use of forms to go beyond forms? Is that like form is emptiness, emptiness is form?
Yeah.
Form is
That's right. I mean, it's a skillful method of using form to get beyond form because it's usually the aspect beyond form that we don't see. In fact, we don't see the subtle aspects of form either. Again, the special quality of the Tantra, why is it so powerful? Why do the Tibetans say this is really the special teachings for especially dangerous times? Is because it's the union of form and emptiness itself. So that aspect of the deity, that visualized form, is purely our mind. It's completely empty. And yet there's form there that allows us to work with it because we're just sort of hardwired to work with form. We spend all our time working with material form. And so this is like sort of easier because you're just going a step of imagination. But again, the teaching shows you this is not some fantasy that we're doing. This is really real. So he's still teaching on clarity. What is meant by clarity of the mind is slightly different from clarity in an ordinary sense. Ordinary clarity allows for the exercise of visual functions solely, while clarity of the mind makes it possible not only to see, but also to hear, smell, taste, touch, and be aware of pleasure or displeasure of the mind. Therefore, it is a clarity with a field of application that is extremely vast. So the next aspect, the mode of functioning is intelligence. Intelligence without obstruction. The room in which you are seated contains emptiness, space in the room, and clarity, lighting. Nevertheless, it is not enough to say it has a mind. One must find a third element of description. For a mind to be, in addition to emptiness and clarity, it must have intelligence, without obstruction. There's a footnote here. Intelligence in Sanskrit is vidya, in Tibetan rikpa, is not the opposite of stupidity, but it has the sense of intellectual ability, the faculty to understand and know. Yeah, rikpa, you hear this, especially in Nyingma, they talk more about rikpa. And vidya in Sanskrit is the same root for the word video, to see. All right, so in addition to emptiness and clarity, the mind must have intelligence without obstruction. This intelligence allows us to effectively know separate things without confusion. The mind is not only aware of phenomenon, which is its clarity, but it recognizes them without confusion, which is intelligence. In what it sees, for example, mind knows what is the sky, a house, a man, and so on. So you might say it's this kind of heightened intelligence. It's an intelligence that's not stained by adventitious thought or especially clingings. Nagarjuna has extensive teachings on the conventional and absolute nature of the mind. So, and the conventional is so helpful, I think, because, even in Buddhist circles, you don't hear of it much. And yet when you come across the teachings, you realize it's such a liberating thing. You see all the confusions out there in the world. And so interestingly, they're talking about, all right, we have absolute experience of the nature of the mind itself, right? But then we have the conventional understanding. So the two truths, absolute and conventional. And on the conventional understanding, which is what leads us to the absolute understanding, the conventional is very slippery if you think about it. And so Nagarjuna talks about these different qualities. You have to have a valid concept, a valid conceptual arising. I mean, all these different arisings out there, it's only the dharmic ones that are valid. Of course, dharma doesn't mean it's labeled in dharma and has been put in a dharma book or taught as formal dharma, but it means what's a valid perception that we have. So, we look at a mirage and we see a lake, but that's not a valid perception. So they go through all these different qualities of what makes something a valid perception. And it's so fascinating to me because, for one thing, it has to be like shared. We look at a strawberry and say it's a strawberry. Everybody says it's a strawberry. Really that's arbitrary, yes. But there's this shared concept there. We're not just running off on our high horse, making up our own concepts. There has to be this shared. And then there has to be a cause and effect aspect to it. You can't have a strawberry that comes out of an apple seed, for instance. So there are these different factors in the relative way that leads to understanding what is a valid relative perception. And the special one to me that I love is that it has to be falsifiable. In other words, it has to be upon this analysis like we just did. What color is it? What form is it? Can you find anything there? That there's nothing there to be found. Because if it's not falsifiable, those are the delusions. People have an idea that, I don't know, that I'm actually a Viking. and I can't falsify it in my own mind. I'm just absolutely attached to that idea. That is an invalid relative perception. So there's extensive, because it's in the relative that things are scary. I mean, or difficult, you might say, because and that's where we live. We live in this relative situation, and that's where we're wrestling and where our confusion exists. It's easy for people intellectually, although it's just intellectual, to have kind of a confidence in the absolute realm, because there's no fighting, so to speak. There's no debate. It's just abiding in things as they truly are. But in the relative factor, that's where we have to do the work, so to speak. So there'll be more about that. But clarity with a field of application that is extremely vast. And you can kind of see how these three aspects are intermingled. I mean, the light is in this empty room, but it's vast because of the emptiness of it. And the knowingness is vast because of the emptiness of it, rather than just a little narrow concept. It's all very experiential. Okay. Mind knows what is the sky, a house, a man, and so on. And so this is so remarkable because you see, you're actually empowering your ordinary mind right now. You're just getting rid of the dross. And this, of course, is the source of the great, I don't know, the power and the non-superstitiousness of the Dharma. So, I mean, I think of, so many of the theistic religions, the trouble they've had in their history, rightly or wrongly, with, various changes in science. But for the Buddhists, it's like not a problem. It's really amazing. And of course, that's a wonderful thing. Fight that we don't have to fight. On this basis of emptiness and clarity, there is intelligence without obstruction. It is the ability to identify, evaluate, and understand. For example, intelligence says, this is an object, it is beautiful or ugly. Identification applies to sounds whose volume and quality are perceived, to smells being repulsive or pleasant, to tastes whose different nuances are recognized, and to pleasant or unpleasant mental experiences. The mind is emptiness, clarity, and intelligence together. Is such a spirit small? No, since it has the ability to make appear and to embrace the entire universe. Is it large? One cannot assert that either. If we have a localized pain in a very precise place in our body, caused, let us say, by an insect sting, we identify our mind with this tiny place by saying, it hurts. Everyone identifies with his or her body that the mind completely occupies. This happens on a vast scale for an elephant or a small scale for an insect. In fact, the mind itself, outside of all identification, is neither small nor great. It is free of these concepts. The fundamental mind is the same for all beings. If one recognizes the mode of being of the mind, it is no other than awakening. Emptiness is the absolute body, in Sanskrit, Dharmakaya. Clarity is the body of perfect experience, Sanskrit, Sambhogakaya. Intelligence is the body of emanation, in Sanskrit, Nirmanakaya. The union of the three components, emptiness, clarity, intelligence, is called mind. It is also called the Tathagata Garbha, the potential of awakening. Tathagata Garbha, Garbha means womb. In Tathagata, there's, usually they say, the thus come one. Tathagata, gata is to go or come. And tata is like ta, this just thus, here, now. Tathagata Garbha, the thus come one, the womb or the Buddhas. So the womb of the Buddhas, he says the potential of awakening. And I've forgotten the other analysis of Tathagata Garbha, but I gave you the one that all the books say. So the other one was something that Kanzi came up with that I've somehow forgotten. But at any rate, it is also called the union of these three components. Emptiness, clarity, intelligence is called mind. It is also called the Tathagata Garbha, the potential of awakening. When the three components are not recognized for what they are, it is the ordinary state of being. Emptiness is expressed as mind. Clarity is expressed as speech. Intelligence without obstruction as body. The three components of pure mind are frozen into the three components of an ordinary personality. By the meditation of Mahamudra, the true nature of the mind is recognized, and the three components appear as the three bodies of awakening. In truth, a Buddha and an ordinary being are identical. They possess fundamentally the same nature. Recognizing this nature is being a Buddha. Not recognizing it is being an ordinary being. It is the only difference. It would take us a long time to examine in detail all the implications of the nature of the mind, the cycle of existence and liberation. A way to summarize them is to refer to the words of Gampopa. And again, as I think most people know, Gampopa was Milarepa's great student. Gampopa was a very skilled Tibetan doctor and was married, and his wife died rather tragically, I guess, with some sort of illness that he couldn't heal. And he was devastated, and eventually became a monk. And he was just an outstanding monk. At some point, he heard about Milarepa, this rogue kind of layperson living as an extreme yogi off in the mountains. And he went to see Milarepa. And Milarepa, of course, recognized his quality and recognized their connection. And here's this pure monk maintaining all his vows perfectly. And he came up to Milarepa, and Milarepa handed him a glass of wine. Here, drink this. And he was immediately thrown into a dilemma. Because here he is a monk, but here he is with his teacher giving him this kind of direct teaching. And he drank it. A great figure. His book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, is the most outstanding example of the non-tantric path. To read it is extremely helpful. Okay, so it would take us a long time to examine in detail all the implications of the nature of the mind, the cycle of existence and liberation. A way to summarize them is to refer to the words of Gampopa. The mind, without artificial creation, is happiness. Water, without pollution, is pure. When we let the mind dwell as it is in its own nature, inner happiness arises of itself. Water left alone is smooth and pure. The mind, agitated by many thoughts, is in turmoil. Released from the overabundance of thoughts, it regains its own limpidity, its clarity. As emptiness, clarity, and intelligence, our mind is perfectly good in and of itself, and is naturally free of suffering, but we do not recognize it. We think it is me, and we bind ourselves with the cord of ego, thinking from now on, I must be happy. It is necessary for me to avoid all unpleasantness. Locked into this attitude, the mind becomes shriveled and creates its own suffering. And this, in a word, is the first noble truth and kind of the tragedy of human existence. In our attempts to create happiness, we actually create our own dissatisfaction and suffering. It's like we don't recognize our own inherent happiness because we don't see that inherent happiness until we've done this work and are able to abide in the nature of the mind itself. But we experience this too way before realization. This practice of meditation is so valuable even in a worldly sense because you can have some problem in your life that you just can't figure out, so to speak. Or sometimes there's not even a problem, but through the practice of calming the mind in meditation, sometimes the solution just kind of bubbles up. You weren't looking for it really, but yet the inherent creativity of the mind is there. And we start to tap into it when we just stop this obsessive thoughting that we do. But of course, it's work. We sit down to meditate, and the thoughts are like assailing us. And, that's a tough one because people can judge themselves saying, oh no, something wrong with me, or I can't meditate or something. Okay. Let's see where we are. I think maybe this is a good place to stop. The Four Veils is a wonderful teaching from Kalu Rinpoche. And next time that'll take us into Mahamudra on page 159. And so I'm going to steal Gretchen's bookmark and put it at page 149. All right, any questions or any discussion this evening? Anybody?
say that it seems like the womb is similar to potential because
Yes.
the womb is the potential for life. Right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit more earthy, you might say, or sort of hit you in, and I think a little more powerful. I mean, the potential for awakening is kind of abstract. We talk about that in seminars and stuff, right? When you say the womb of the Buddhas, you have this image of people giving birth. And what I like about that is that, the richness of this language, the little bit that I've touched on it, I don't know these languages, but even the little bit you do, they're so clear and they're so helpful. They've done so much work over the centuries, of just honing this down as to what works. So what we get is a great sort of foundation of faith. It's worked. All you have to do is see the Dalai Lama, you see Gar Rinpoche, and you realize, well, he can tell you to do something kind of strange, like say Vajrakalaya. That isn't something naturally that they're not teaching Vajrakalaya in the grade schools, People aren't looking for Vajrakalaya. But then you have someone like that who, you've sort of tested too, and you see their qualities, and they say, why don't you do Vajrakalaya? You say, okay, I will. It's like a great tennis teacher or something telling you, why don't you hold your racket just a little bit different? You give them the benefit of the doubt. But this womb of the Buddhas is always something I've just liked because it shows you it's not some sort of, like he said here, some sort of empty realm that we're just going to go abide in and hey, get off of my cloud. It's not like that. It's this complete womb. I mean, what could be more earthy, painful, and yet potential for a life and everything that comes out of that, all the ups and downs, the sadnesses, the sacrifices, and yet there it is. So it's, it's real. It's talking about our life. So I love that.
Womb implies actions because something's already been ignited, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of potential for a lot of things that don't happen.
Yeah. It also indicates to me too, this kind of something that is non-ego, because if you're giving birth, I mean, there's another being there. So even though you're intimately involved with that being, you can't, I mean, it's a big psychological problem to completely blend your ego with your child's. The child has to have existence. So, but this is it. In the knowing too, we make distinctions. This is a wheel. This is a car. This is a cart. Whatever. Those distinctions are not violative of Dharma. I mean, we can use our thinking mind. That's so liberating because people are at war with their thinking minds and they think, well, if I can just get away from it, and they hear all the talk about calming your thoughts and all of that. But in bodhicitta and vipassana, we're using the thinking mind. That's so empowering for people. And with that empowerment comes a relaxation, because again, you don't have to be doing something that you're not qualified to do. In fact, we're qualified in spades already. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're back in the saddle after our week off. After Vajrakalaya, people are still recovering. A couple people had various sicknesses floating around, but they seem to be recovering. I mean, a couple of COVID. I had pneumonia. Yeah, I'm on my 7th day of antibiotics, and it seems to be working. I sound a lot worse. I feel fine, but I guess I still have a little pneumonia in my right lung, so they're gonna get chest X-ray when that's done. But yeah, all the coughing, that it wasn't COVID, it was just me. And then Joellen had something. She slept for 6.5 hours. First day that she didn't come to Vajrakalaya, but it's not COVID. And Chuck's wife, Peggy too, she had a similar kind of thing, but only lasted like 36 hours. So there are a lot of wild things floating around right now. The ordinary flu season, I guess. So back in the saddle. Okay, then we'll do a dedication. It's an expression of our gratitude and our understanding. We vow to liberate all motherly sentient beings, each one of them, and never cease until that is actually true. Svaha. Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys up
Hope you
there.
hope you have a speedy recovery.
Yeah, thanks. I'm doing fine. I'm really doing fine. And it feels good. It all feels good. Yeah. Okay.